Data security is a hot topic in general, and data privacy is a part of that, and that concerns proper usage of collection, retention, and data storage. But within Sitecore, it can be somewhat complex to get a good understanding of what happens with your data. My name is Rob Habraken, and I'm a Chief Technology Officer and Technical Consultant at WeAU. I have quite a lot of experience in Sitecore, but I'm also interested in other topics like Azure DevOps, Azure in general, and of course, data privacy, which is why I am hosting this video today. Within Sitecore, we do have the right to be forgotten feature, but it requires manual action to trigger it. And I think that neuralizing our marketers shouldn't be a manual process. And then there's also the common misconception that cookie lifetime is related to data storage, which isn't, because your visitor will be anonymous again when visiting Sitecore for the next time, or your Sitecore website, but the data will still persist within Sitecore, the Sitecore XDB. So to get a good understanding of what happens in Sitecore, let's take a look at what the data does and how things are being stored. First of all, the motivation for me to host this talk is that, as I've mentioned, I've seen some incorrect assumptions on data retention. But also, I think there's no best practice or proven example on how to solve this in a neat way. Sometimes the documentation can be unclear, or in the past, it sometimes even was incorrect. I'll get to that later on. And all of these things together generate a lack of clarity that actually inhibits organizations to use XDB to the full extent, which I think is a pity. But the most important thing that you should know is that if you do not act, all the data within Sitecore will be stored indefinitely. So the challenge that we have is that there's no automatic disposal of data within Sitecore out of the box. Secondly, we need to clean data per entry, so per visitor, and we need to stay compliant with our privacy policy. Also, there's different types of consent and different types of retention periods. So for example, for a marketing campaign, you want to store data for a couple of months. Whereas for the Sitecore XDB profile, you might want to store data for a longer period of time, like a few years. And the last challenge that we have is that the right to be forgotten feature within Sitecore just doesn't cover all the data that is in Sitecore. And I think this together, it gives us a challenge that we need to solve to be able to use XDB without any hesitation. First, let's have a look at what happens with the data when a visitor visits your website. This diagram is from the Sitecore documentation, and you can clearly see, and I've added a mark where the session ends, but you can clearly see there's two parts of the data. You have the tracker model, which is being created when your visitor hits the website, and it collects the data of your visitor within that session. Then, upon session end, this data will be transformed into an XConnect model, which is being stored in the database. And this is important to understand. The left object lives within your session, the right one within your database. And that means that the left one is tied to your cookie, which disappears when the session ends, and when you delete the cookie, you lose the link, but the data stays within Sitecore, within the database. Or actually, I should say databases, because there's more than one, and we're going to dive into that later on. So to come up with a solution, I came up with what I call sliding expiration. And why is it sliding? Well, as you see, the different clocks in this picture are all set at a different time. Your visitors will enter the website at a different time. The retention periods will differ because you might have a campaign, or you might have XDB. But also, some visitors will stop using your website over time and others will continue to use it. So actually, your retention is also sliding in a way. And we need to delete this data compliant to your privacy policy. So I should say there are ways to clean up your data within Sitecore, obviously. And the most important one is the execute right to be forgotten feature. That's a method you can call, but you need to do it from code. So there's some implementation involved. And obviously, as a marketer, that requires a user story being executed or being implemented by your developers to actually implement this. So it's not a very easy and absolutely not an automatic way of doing it. The second one is you can go in the experience profile and you can anonymize a contact. This only works per contact and it's time consuming, and you wouldn't want to go in and anonymize all the contacts by hand, obviously. And the third one solves that issue. That is the Analytics Database Manager, which is available from the Sitecore Marketplace. But that one only removes at a certain cutoff date, and you also need to do it manually as well, which means that you have to go in every day to clean up all the data that's older than a certain amount of time, and you can also not have different retention periods here. So the one thing that all of these methods have in common is that it is not automatic. It's not an automatic process. It requires manual intervention or a custom job. And we need to solve that, in my opinion. So what do we need? We need to know that cookie lifetime doesn't equal PII disposal. We need to execute the right to be forgotten right after the consent expires. We should run this automatically after each last interaction and make it sliding. And we should, or at least want, the flexibility to use this in different scenarios as well. The technical requirements would be that we want minimal customization, minimal code. We want to stay close to Sitecore and actually utilize the capabilities of Sitecore itself. And last but not least, I would like a higher reusability for marketers, so they can use the retention activities, the cleanup of the data whenever they actually need it to be executed. And there's only one thing that can solve all of this in this way, and that is an automation plan. But an automation plan doesn't have the capability of executing the right to be forgotten. So that is exactly what I have solved. I'm going to demo very shortly what I have built. I'm not going to do this in detail or showing code, but I will reference my open source repository, and you can have a look right there for the details of this implementation. But in general, what I have done is I have created a custom activity type, and there's also a link on how to do that within the handouts of my presentation. And it's actually, apart from the custom activity, very easy. It just executes the right to be forgotten on the current contact. And by making this custom activity, I can embed it in a marketing automation plan. And as you see on the right, you can meet specific rules to enter this plan. And in this case, I've configured it to execute whenever a contact didn't interact with my channel or any channel for the last 2 years. And obviously, you can configure that to be like months or 1 year or whatever you like. And what this does is, per contact, this will fire this automation plan whenever the moment that a retention period expires, and it will anonymize my contact. But I can also use this in, for example, a campaign plan where my campaign is ended and I want to anonymize a contact. So this makes it highly reusable and also minimal code to implement a continuously automatic disposal of my data. And it will be carried out at least daily, but probably more times a day. And that depends on your configuration, by the way. I have an installable Sitecore package for you that includes the solution, but I have also open sourced the code. So you can have a look at my repository at GitHub called Data Privacy, which includes Habitat corporate example implementation on 9.2. And it includes a custom activity type, as I've shown you, the marketing automation template. So you don't have to create the marketing automation plan yourself. You can customize it from there on. And it is tested on version 9.1 and higher. So all the major versions like 9.2, 9.3 do work. For 10, I'm still working on that. It'll probably work right the same, but there's some small changes that I need to implement and that I will cover in the next part of my talk. One thing, don't forget, if you are creating custom facets or facet properties within XDB, you'll need to mark them PII sensitive to make them eligible for automatic disposal. So if you want the execute right to be forgotten to also work for this, please use this PII sensitive attribute. So now we have covered the automatic disposal of my context in XDB. We still have Sitecore Forms, and there's something special with it. Let's have a look at all the databases of a typical Sitecore installation. And by that, I mean the non-content databases, of course. As you see, you have multiple databases that store data of your visitors, some in a processing way, some in a reporting or aggregation way, and others in a more persistent way. There's only 3 that store data in a persistent way. That's the XDB collection database for your XDB profiles, your forms database, and your EXM database. The other ones only aggregate data or clean up themselves. So we don't have to worry about those. And then when you execute the rights to be forgotten, Sitecore takes care of the XDB collection database and the EXM database. But as you can see, the forms database isn't included here. So we might have a problem here because this data will stay within Sitecore indefinitely. I should say that storage is optional, so you don't need to actually store data in the database when you use forms. As you can see in this example on the right of the screen, you see that the submit button only identifies a context and redirects. Maybe it'll call an API or does something with the data, but this example doesn't store it. However, when you add a save data action in your submit button, you'll need to arrange the disposal yourself. In 9.3, and that's the first version that allows you to do this, you can actually delete data from the form without going into the SQL, into SQL itself. But you can either delete the complete list of submissions or a specific date range. But I want to dispose of the data when the retention period is ended, and that's different for every single form entry. So this is not going to help me much. And also you should know that there is no link for Sitecore 9 between XDB and a form entry. And I'll explain that to you. Within the documentation, it says that the forms database and the XDB reporting database have a connection. Every form entry that is stored actually contains an interaction, or is referred to by an interaction, I should say. And this interaction is stored in the reporting database, and there a form ID is stored. But this doesn't help you when cleaning out the data, because if you go and look at the data being stored within the interaction database, you see that not the form entry ID is stored, but the form ID. This means that you can only see which contact fill in which form but you can't see which entry is filled in by that user. And the entries is the entity, the object that we need to clean up. So we need to fix this. And Sitecore 10.0 solved this issue for us. They added the Redact API for Sitecore Forms. It's an API that you still need to implement yourself, but when you call it, it will put fields on redacted if you're actually cleaning up, nullifying the contact IDs, deleting any files uploaded. It just cleans out the database neatly. So that is a cool feature for 10. And if you take a look at a 10 database, you will see that form entry table now also includes a contact ID. So they have included the right connection between an XDB profile and a contact and a form entry. But the cleanup is still a little bit of a custom job and also not included in the rights to be forgotten features. So let's fix that as well. We need to, as I said, establish this link between a contact and a form. And most of the developers attending this talk will know that the forms data cannot be accessed via the Sitecore API. So we need a little bit of SQL a little bit of SQL to implement this functionality. And we do that. We do need to create a custom class for that. I decompiled the experience forms assembly, and there is a SQL form data provider, but it's not ideal to use in this case because we're running this script if you use an automation plan from the XConnect role. And the XConnect role doesn't have the right assemblies to do this, and you would have to create a lot of customizations to actually implement this feature there. So I will now demo you how I have solved this issue. First of all, I have created a custom save action. So next to the save data that we already have out of the box, I have created a save data with contact. If you use that instead of the save data, I have included, and this is only a snippet of the code, I will reference the whole project in a few slides. But as you can see here, I added the contact ID within the fields stored in the form entry. So I actually, with this step, with this custom save action in Sitecore Forms, I established a link between the contact and the form entry. And you can see that when you go and look within the form entry table in SQL now, you can see that there's an extra field for each form entry with the actual XDB tracker ID. So now I can do the cleanup. I can create a cleanup script for that. To do that, I have built a data management service instead of that SQL provider that's already in there. And it just contains a very simple SQL script to delete form entries for a specific or a certain XDB tracker ID. And that I used in another custom activity for the marketing automation plan. As you can see here, it's called Erase Form Submissions. And I used that to actually do the same thing as I did with the anonymized contact, but then for the forms, and I included it in the same marketing automation plan. So now you can use this step together with anonymizing the contact, but you can also use it separately because, for example, if you have a campaign and you run an email marketing campaign, or you collect data from people for a specific campaign that is only valid for like 2 months, this would be a good thing to include at the end of your marketing automation plan when people have finished the whole campaign and you don't require to store the data anymore. You can just use this step solely and do not anonymize the contact, but at least clean up the forms database. So it's a very reusable an easy way to erase this form data. I've went one step further because I also created an XConnect service plugin. And this XConnect service plugin actually works like a plugin for executing the right to be forgotten and executing my erased form submission step. So if we go one slide back, you'll see that the anonymized contact step, the second one, now also automatically covers the erased form submission by using this XConnect service plugin. And this means that if you execute the right to be forgotten from your own code, or you clean up the specific contact by going in the experience profile, as I showed you earlier, as a marketer, and you just anonymize one single contact by using this XConnect service plugin, it also automatically goes in the forms database and cleans those records out as well. So I think it's a very good addition to this code example, because it just takes care of executing the right to be forgotten among all the databases within your, let's say, default Sitecore implementation, because obviously when you add more databases yourself, you also need to take care of that yourself. But this is a good example on how to do that if you have any other custom implementations on storing data. This example using Sitecore Forms is also included in my code project on GitHub. It includes a Sitecore module with a custom activity type, the custom save action of Sitecore Forms, the XConnect service plugin, and it's also tested for all the major 9 versions. Obviously, this is just an example. You can use your own triggers, maybe not use like a period of time, but you can use a button on your website that triggers a marketing automation plan. I don't know. You can utilize it in every way you like, and you can use the Sitecore module. Then you don't have to do any development, or you can go in and take a look at my my example code, and you can just copy in the Helix component that I've built, so you can extend it or change it any way you like. And one more remark is that if you want enhanced security and you're not using Azure PaaS but an on-premises SQL database, you need to enable transparent data encryption yourself. And this specifically is important because Sitecore Forms stores the data unencrypted in plain text. And obviously, if you want to be secure, that's something you might want to have a look at. So to close up, what we've seen is the most important thing is don't rely on cookie lifetime. It just isn't the same. If you set your cookie lifetime to match your privacy policy, for example, 2 years, your cookie might be gone, but your data is stored within Sitecore for a much longer period of time. So we need to fix that. And to do so, I advise you to stay close to Sitecore. Use the existing functionality. The marketing automation plans really are great. It's a very powerful tool for you that is quite easy to extend, and you can create all the customizations that you need to create custom activities for your marketers. And it's a very flexible way of organizing your flows. And that way you can automate whatever you can, or you should automate whatever you can. And this enables you to do so because, well, as you have seen, when implementing the anonymization and erasal of data, like I've shown you, I don't have to worry about this anymore. I know it's covered, and that's really comforting. If you want to check out my code, head over to my GitHub repository called Data Privacy. And if you have any, suggestions, you can create a pull request, or you can create an issue if you have any questions, or just reach out to me via Twitter or any other channel. I'd be happy to help you out and to see what I can learn from you as well. Also, I will work on the Sitecore 10 version of my packages as well, and this will be released in the near future, I hope. Thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Hello and welcome to the live chat. Here we have Rob Habraken. Thank you for this exciting presentation, Rob.
Thank you, Tomas.
We have many questions coming in, and let's dive into them. So you are saying that there is no value for those records in Sitecore, that we are safe to dispose those data.
Yes, that question was being asked when I was explaining the Sitecore Forms implementation for Sitecore 9. And it is indeed the case that there is no link between the contact and the form entry. So you need to establish that link yourself in order to be able to clean out the data once the retention period has ended.
Thank you for the answer, and thank you for the question, Rob. If you have any question, please use the question box on the right. The next question is from Amit. Have you implemented a similar solution for web forms for marketers?
No, this example only works for Sitecore 9 and up. So it's only Sitecore Forms, actually. That's also the version that includes the right to be forgotten functionality and everything that this is related to. So, but you can perfectly well just dive in the SQL database and discover what's being stored and refer to my code and see how it's been cleaned out. So maybe it's inspiring to you, but there's no out of the box web form for marketer version from my side.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that not every version of Sitecore includes these GDPR functions. Can you please let us know which versions of Sitecore support these?
Well, to have the full capabilities, well, obviously every new version contains new features. So if you're running on Sitecore 10, you have the most tooling available. Also because the link between forms and the contact has been established out of the box in Sitecore 10. But I think from version 9 and up, you have the tooling, and I have tested my code project with Sitecore 9.1 and up, all the major versions.
Okay, thank you. When you created this module, what was the most difficult challenge during this project?
Well, what is difficult is that I was trying to run it from XConnect, and it's a scheduled job. So you never know when it's exactly going to kick in. And I was editing my data and my processes within the marketing automation plan. So that was challenging sometimes to effectively know if everything works or if it doesn't. But I got some excellent help from some articles I also used for building this. They are included in my my handout. If the download link is working again, I'm not sure, but when it is on the detail page of the session, then you can download it there, and on the last slide you can find the links that I've used to build this. And other than that, it's just diving into the SQL databases and tracking what data is being stored.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned that the version 10 implementation is on the way. Do you have more concrete timeline?
No, I don't have a timeline yet. I'm still working on that, and I'm also actually curious about what the interest is in actually having it as a plugin, or if I maybe can help out with some blog posts and give some guidance on how to implement it. But I don't have timelines yet. No.
Okay. We have many questions, but the last one that we can cover is coming from Craig. Our GDPR system of record will be Salesforce Marketing Cloud with Sitecore. What other connections would need to be made when the right to be forgotten comes from Salesforce and not Sitecore?
That's actually a very good question. And it doesn't only go for Salesforce, it's for every system you hook up to Sitecore and send data to. If you execute the right to be forgotten out of the box, it just doesn't cover that implementation. So you can use the same principle as I have done and create a hook. And that is in the part that I've showed with Sitecore Forms, where I actually use the XConnect service plugin to trigger extra cleanup services. So if you build a method in your external data source, whether it be Salesforce or anything else, just a little piece of custom code that cleans it out, you can use the same code as I've done and add it there, and so it will cover when a marketer clicks the right to be forgotten, or when you automate it via the automation plan, it will trigger that cleanup as well.
Thank you very much for all your answers and your presentation, Rob, and thank you for all the questions, everyone. Our time is over now, but let's keep the conversation going on Sitecore community, Sitecore Slack, and everywhere where you can find Rob. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your symposium.
Okay, bye-bye.